The Anti-Glamour Power. Carl Jung's secret of why being boring is the ultimate psychological superpower. The most psychologically dangerous and ultimately powerful people in your life are likely the ones you barely notice. They are not on social media performing their lives. They don't dominate conversations with fascinating, dramatic stories. They aren't trying to impress anyone, and they don't care if you're impressed. And that, Jung discovered, is exactly why they are unstoppable. Carl Jung stumbled upon a truth that goes directly against everything modern society teaches. The people we label as boring have accessed a form of silent power that those chasing the spotlight never will. Not because they lack depth or charisma, but because they have consciously abandoned the exhausting, costly performance that drains everyone else's life force. In this video, I'm revealing Jung's 5 secret discoveries about why being psychologically boring is the ultimate strategic superpower. These are the insights that explain why the most fundamentally powerful individuals are often the least interesting, and why your desperate, compulsive need to be fascinating is the very thing that is giving away your power for approval. If you've been exhausting yourself trying to be interesting, captivating, or memorably unique, Jung would categorize that as surrendering your innate power for mere applause. But there's something that truly, internally powerful have learned that fundamentally changes the game. The hidden trap. Attention currency versus inner life. Here is what's actually happening in the modern world that almost nobody truly sees. Society runs on an attention currency. Being interesting is how you purchase belonging, validation, and a stable identity. From our earliest childhood conditioning, we learn that fascinating equals valuable, boring equals invisible. So we perform, we curate, and we exhaust our energy trying to be the most captivating person in every room, on every feed. Jung watched this universal performance and saw something profound and deeply sad. The most interesting people were often the most empty and fragile. They had become so utterly dependent on others' external attention that they ceased to exist without an audience. Every capabilities and true mastery. Jung wrote, "The compulsion to be interesting is the modern neurosis. It creates a person who exists only in others' perceptions, who has no inner life, because all life is turned outward for display." This is the psychological trap. The more interesting you try to be, the less powerful you fundamentally become. Every performance depletes your internal reserves. Every attempt to fascinate fragments your authentic self. Every effort to captivate makes you dependent on the very people you are trying to impress. You become a constant performer, and you are only powerful as long as people continue to watch. The boring person discovered the profound escape. Stop performing. Stop seeking approval. Stop giving away power for attention. And in that stopping, they access a form of power that simply cannot be taken away. The power of complete psychological sovereignty. But wait until you see what Jung calculated about where your energy actually goes when you're trapped in the cycle of being interesting. The power of reclaimed energy, closing the performance drain. Jung's first discovery is a practical energy calculation. Being boring instantly gives you back the vast percentage of energy you've been spending on maintaining a facade. That reclaimed energy isn't just a bonus. It becomes rocket fuel for actual achievement, deep work, and internal transformation. Think about what maintaining the image of interesting truly costs you psychologically. Social tax. Every conversation requires you to be permanently on, scanning for opportunities to insert fascinating anecdotes, monitoring fleeting reactions, and subtly adjusting your performance in real time. Digital tax. Every social media post needs careful curation, selecting the most flattering angle, crafting the perfect, quotable caption, and constantly checking for engagement, likes, and comments. Experiential tax. Every interaction demands you act as a self-generating fascination machine, transforming mundane experiences into entertainment, ordinary thoughts into insightful commentary, and simple feelings into dramatic, shareable revelations. Experiences without embellishment. No energy is spent on transforming simple reality into dramatic fiction. She exists without apology or justification. No power is given away, proving their worth through entertainment value. Jung documented this transformation repeatedly in his analytical practice. A patient who had been the life of every party described her boring transformation as suddenly closing 10 high-energy programs running in the background of her mind her entire adult life. The mental space that opened up, the emotional energy that returned, I had no idea I was spending so much on being interesting, she told Jung. She later calculated that she was spending 4 hours a day just thinking about how to be more interesting, an unpaid, exhausting part-time job powered by her own life force. With that suddenly reclaimed energy, she wrote her most important work. The boring her was infinitely more creative and productive than the interesting her had ever been. The energy reclaimed from performance became power applied to reality. You stop performing power, and you start accumulating it in measurable, actionable terms. The power of invulnerability, cutting the strings of control. Jung's second insight cuts directly to the core of power dynamics and control. Boring people are psychologically invulnerable because they don't need what others are selling: attention, validation, or inclusion. You simply cannot control someone who doesn't need to be interesting. Here is the deeper psychology Jung uncovered. Interesting people are dependent on attention for validation. Like anyone dependent on an external supply source, they will instinctively compromise to maintain that supply. They will subtly adjust their values for viral moments, modify their truth for social approval, and perform whatever role gets the recognition they crave. They are controlled by approval, with attention as the string. Every person who can give or withhold attention holds a string, making interesting people instantly responsive to countless external forces. But boring people have simultaneously cut all the strings. They don't need your attention because they are trends require wanting to be interestingly current. They had become what Jung called psychologically autonomous, self-governing, self-validating, and completely self-directed. One executive discovered this when forced to stop performing after burnout. His board tried to pressure him using the usual corporate tactics, threatening his reputation, his status among peers, and his image. But he told Jung, they kept trying to push buttons that no longer existed. They threatened to make me look uninteresting to investors, unimpressive to competitors, ordinary to the media. But I had already become those things by choice. Their influence tools were useless against someone who had already surrendered the very thing they threatened to take. His boring had made him untouchable. Jung called this the invulnerability of the uninteresting. When you don't need to be fascinating, you can't be influenced with promises of visibility. You can't be swayed with offers of attention. And you can't be controlled with the currency everyone else desperately needs. The power of depth, the privilege of profundity. If boring people aren't performing on the surface, what Jung discovered they are doing instead will completely change how you think about psychological depth. When you stop performing on the surface, you naturally sink into depths that interesting people can never reach. Boring people are not shallow. They are often so deep that surface observers can't even see their bottom. Interesting people live in the shallows by necessity. Depth takes time, silence, and stillness, none of which are interesting to watch or share. Profundity requires boring preparation, unsexy persistence, and non-dramatic development. So, interesting people splash around on the surface, creating fascinating ripples and waves, but never diving below the first few feet. They are so busy being interesting about life that they never actually penetrate life's core depths. Jung wrote, "The interesting person is confined to superficiality. They cannot afford depth because depth isn't performable." Insights. Boring people are having insights too profound to perform. While others are talking about transformation, boring people are transforming in ways that cannot be talked about. One of Jung's quietest patients, an accountant everyone overlooked, had the most profound inner life Jung ever encountered. When asked why he never shared his insights, he replied, "Share it how? Make it interesting? Package my soul for social consumption? The moment I try to make it fascinating for others, it stops being profound for me. Every truth I've discovered becomes diminished the moment I perform it for attention. I choose depth over display, reality over representation." He discovered what Jung called the boring path to wisdom, the recognition that the most profound experiences cannot be made interesting without diminishing them. The power of foundation, the compound effect of boring work. Jung's fourth revelation is structural. While interesting people build castles in the sky that collapse with each new performance, boring people build foundations in bedrock that last lifetimes. Their power isn't flashy. It is structural, foundational, compound, and ultimately, unshakable. Interesting people need constant novelty, change, and stimulation to maintain their status. They simply cannot do the slow, patient, boring work of building real foundations, because foundations are not interesting to construct or discuss. Nobody wants to hear about the 1,000 small, unsexy actions that create lasting success. Everyone wants the dramatic breakthrough story. So, interesting people build elaborate structures on sand, impressive to look at, impossible to sustain, and constantly needing a dramatic, interesting rebuild. But boring people can do what Jung called the great boring work, the daily disciplines that compound into power, the incremental progress that becomes transformation, the patient building that creates empires. Projectile, they can maintain the same routines for decades without needing to make them interesting. They can work on single, complex problems for years without needing dramatic updates or stimulating distractions. They can delay gratification indefinitely because they don't need the interesting payoff others crave. Jung documented this pattern. Boring people gatherings with his obsession, having nothing to share on social media. The outcome was clear to Jung. The boring brother eventually held 17 patents and built a company worth hundreds of millions. The interesting brother held 17 stories. Jung called this the compound effect of being boring. the extraordinary advantage of being able to do unsexy work for unlimited time. While others need interesting results to stay motivated, boring people can labor in complete obscurity until their work becomes undeniable. The power of sovereignty, complete psychological freedom. Jung's final discovery is the ultimate form of power. Boring people achieve what he called complete psychological freedom, total liberation from the entire performance system that keeps interesting people trapped in a cycle they don't even recognize as imprisonment. Think about the invisible cage interesting people live in. Exercised is evaluated for its interest potential. Is this worth sharing? Will this get reactions? Every experience is measured by its story value. Not, did I enjoy it, but will others enjoy hearing about it? Every achievement is weighed by its impression impact. Not what it means to me, but how impressive it seems to others. They are trapped in an exhausting cycle called needing to be fascinating. Jung wrote, "The need to be interesting is one of the most subtle forms of self-bondage. It appears as freedom. Look how interesting and unique I am," while being the ultimate dependency. Every interesting person is psychologically dependent on every eye that might watch them. But boring people have escaped completely. They walked out of the cage others don't even know they are in. They don't need to justify their existence through being interesting, because existence needs no justification. Jung experienced this freedom himself in his later years. After decades of being the interesting psychologist with controversial theories, he chose to become boring. He withdrew to his Bollingen Tower, a self-built stone retreat, carved stones in silence, painted mandalas without explaining them, and lived simply without documenting it. His colleagues thought he'd become irrelevant. He had found his freedom. I no longer needed to be Carl Jung, psychologically self-sufficient, emotionally self-contained, and spiritually self-directed. The final paradox of power. Let me synthesize Jung's complete picture of why being boring makes you profoundly powerful. Reclaim massive energy from the drain of constant performance. Become impossible to manipulate because you don't need the currency of attention. Access profound depths unavailable to surface performers. Build unshakable foundations through sustained compound work. Achieve complete psychological freedom from the entire performance system. This is not about becoming dull or withdrawn. It's about stopping the exhausting performance of being interesting and discovering the immense power that performance was consuming. It is about choosing substance over style, depth over display, being over seeming. Jung would tell you, the most powerful person in any room is the one who doesn't need the room's attention. The most successful person is the one who can do the boring work longer than anyone else. The most free person is the one who doesn't need society to find them interesting. The paradox Jung identified is profound. By becoming boring, you become genuinely interesting. Not performing interest, but being genuinely, authentically, powerfully yourself. But by then, you no longer care if others find you interesting or not. That is the ultimate power. If you are exhausted from trying to be interesting, Jung would want you to know, being boring isn't giving up, it's growing up. It's not failure, it's freedom. It's not weakness, it's the ultimate strength. Start small. Have one conversation without trying to be fascinating. Spend one day without curating your image. Feel the power that floods back when you stop the performance. Your boring is your superpower. Your ordinary is your extraordinary. Your simplicity is your sovereignty. The moment you stop trying to be interesting is the moment you become truly powerful.